Hey there. Tonight, we are going on a deep journey into the silent shadows of the Judean desert to see what happened when researchers finally allowed a massive artificial intelligence model to read the ancient fragments that were never meant to be seen by human eyes. Recently, a group of scientists fed the digitized scans of the Dead Sea Scrolls into an advanced neural network, and the data it returned was truly terrifying because it revealed a version of history that has been hidden for 2,000 years, and it shows that the scriptures we know today were shaped by fear and survival in a world that was falling apart. If you find peace in the quiet unearthing of our dark history, please gently leave a like and subscribe to our Hall of Stories so you can join us by the fire every night. Tell me where you are resting tonight in the comments as we gather from all over the globe to share the warmth of the quiet dark. Now it is time to turn down the lights in your room. Let the heavy darkness of the space settle around you like a thick, warm fur cloak draped gently over your weary shoulders. Breathe in the cool, clean air of the room and feel it slowly fill the deep, empty spaces of your tired lungs. Breathe out all the tight tension and all the rushing anxiety you have carried throughout the long, busy day. Let your heavy jaw soften and drop slightly in the dark. Let your hands unclench from tight, rigid fists and rest easily and loosely by your sides. You are completely safe here in the dark, and you are perfectly hidden from all the loud, demanding noises of the waking world. I want you to let your tired mind drift far back across the vast, deep ocean of time. We are traveling back thousands of years into the deep, silent canyons of the Judean wilderness, where the limestone is bleached white by a sun that never seems to rest. To understand the magnitude of what the machines discovered, we must first understand the physical struggle of reaching the site known officially as Cave 8, but remembered by history as the Cave of Horror. Imagine standing on the very edge of a jagged cliff where the earth simply ends and the desert floor drops away into a dizzying abyss of heat and silence. The air is so dry that it feels thin and sharp in your throat, and the only sound is the low, mournful whistle of the wind as it scrapes against the ancient rock. The drop is 80 meters of vertical limestone wall, and the researchers had to secure their heavy nylon ropes to the very edge of this precipice. I want you to feel the weight of the metal harness as it pulls against your hips, and the way the climbing gear feels cold and heavy in the early morning light. As the team began to rappel down the cliff, the air felt different with every meter they descended. The wind whipped against their ears and carried the fine, sharp grit of the desert into their hair and eyes. They hung there in the open air, suspended between the bright blue sky and the deep, dark earth. Below them, the mouth of the cave appeared like a small, dark wound in the side of the mountain, and it was a place where no one had walked for 60 long years. The rock under their feet was rough and pitted by centuries of slow erosion, and as they kicked off the stone to lower themselves further, they could feel the faint vibration of the mountain itself, deep in their bones. The mechanical clicking of the metal carabiners was the only modern sound in a landscape that had remained unchanged since the time of the Roman legions. When they finally reached the narrow ledge of the cave, they had to crawl through a cloud of fine gray dust that had settled over everything like a thick, heavy layer of velvet. This dust was composed of pulverized limestone and ancient organic matter, and the silent breath of 1,000 years. Inside the cave, the light from the entrance struggled to reach the back corners, and the researchers had to use powerful lamps to cut through the gloom. They were not looking for grand statues or heavy gold, but for something much more fragile. They were looking for tiny scraps of parchment that were often no larger than a postage stamp. These pieces of history were so thin and brittle that the slightest touch could turn them to powder. The researchers used soft brushes to sweep away the layers of time, and they moved with a slowness that felt like a ritual. Every grain of sand they removed was a moment of history being uncovered, and the silence in the cave was so heavy that they could hear the sound of their own heartbeats echoing against the stone. Recently, the team fed the high-resolution scans of these fragments into an advanced artificial intelligence model, and the data it returned was staggering. The machines were able to look past the centuries of decay and the dark stains of age to see the ink beneath. For decades, these pieces had been silent because they were too damaged to read, but the AI was able to piece them together like a complex digital jigsaw puzzle. The software looked at the curve of every letter and the way the ink pulled into the fibers of the parchment. It began to rebuild the sentences that had been broken for nearly 2,000 years. It found 15 columns of text written in ancient Greek that had not been seen since the desert took them. The computer looked at the handwriting and noticed things that a human would never be able to see without the help of a supercomputer. It saw the way the scribe held the pen and the pressure of the reed against the surface. It detected the subtle differences between two different writers who were working on the same scroll. One hand was steady and formal, while the other was a bit more rushed, as if they were trying to finish a task before a great shadow fell over them. The AI reconstructed the Book of Zechariah and the Book of Nahum, and as the words appeared on the screen, the researchers realized that this was not just a copy of a known text, but a unique reworking. I want you to imagine the light of the computer screen in a quiet, darkened laboratory. The room is cool, and the only sound is the low hum of the server racks. On the monitor, the tiny scraps of parchment are magnified 1,000 times. You can see the individual fibers of the animal skin and the way the ancient ink has bled into the grain over 2 millennia. The AI identifies a stroke of a letter that has been faded by the salt of the Dead Sea, and it fills in the missing curve with a ghostly blue light. It is a process of digital alchemy. The machine traces the lineage of the text and realizes that it is a variant of the Septuagint, and it is a version of the sacred words that existed before the Bible was finalized. This means that the community in the cave was making their own choices about what was sacred. They were editing and shifting the words to fit their own struggle. The AI points out that the language used is Greek, but the names of the creator are written in Old Paleo-Hebrew. This was a deliberate choice. It was a way of holding on to a deeper past while using the language of the empire that was trying to destroy them. The contrast on the screen is sharp and clear, and it reveals a level of human desperation that we never suspected. As you lie here in your bed, let the image of that cave settle in your mind. The air in the cave is perfectly still, and the dust hangs in the shafts of light like tiny suspended diamonds. The floor is covered in the fine gray silt of the ages, and if you were to walk across it, your footsteps would make no sound. The walls are cold and damp, and they seem to lean inward, as if they are trying to listen to the secrets being uncovered. The researchers are moving with extreme caution. They are wearing gloves and masks because their own breath could destroy the fragile parchment. They lift a fragment with a pair of tweezers, and the piece of skin is so light that it almost floats. It is the color of old honey and dried leaves. On its surface is a single word, and that word has been waiting in the dark for 2,000 years to be read. The AI is the first thing to recognize it. The machine processes the shapes and the distances between the letters, and it announces that this is a passage from the prophet Nahum. It is a passage about the mountains quaking and the earth burning. Think about the patience of the desert. It can hold a secret for 2,000 years without flinching. It can keep a piece of parchment safe from the rain and the rot, until the right technology is born to reach into the dark. You are safe in your room, but you are connected to that ancient desert silence. The air in your room is soft and cool, and the memory of the Judean heat is only a story now. Let the rhythm of the descent move through your thoughts. Imagine the rope sliding through the metal rings. Imagine the steady movement of your hands. Imagine the feeling of the limestone wall passing by as you lower yourself into the void. The ground is far below, but you are held by the strength of the equipment and the focus of the team. When you finally reach the ledge of the cave and step off the rope, the ground feels solid and certain. You step into the mouth of the cave, and the heat of the desert is replaced by a deep, ancient chill. The cave of horror is starting to speak through the machines, and the truth it tells is one of incredible endurance. It is a story of a people who would not give up even when they were surrounded by an empire that wanted to erase them. They carried their scrolls into the dark, and they hid them in the cracks of the mountain because they believed the words were worth saving. The AI has proven them right. The words survived, and they are here with us tonight in the quiet of the firelight. The past is not gone, it is just waiting for us to look closer. I want you to visualize the scribes sitting in this very cave long ago. The light of a small oil lamp flickers against the rock. The smell of the olive oil and the smoke fills the cramped space. The scribe is hunched over his parchment, and his back aches from the cold. He is dipping his reed pen into the black ink, and he is writing the words of the prophets with a shaking hand. He hears the sound of Roman soldiers in the distance, but he does not stop. He writes for the future. He writes for us. The AI scans the tremors in his handwriting, and it sees the fear and the devotion. It sees the way his hand gripped the pen tighter as the ink ran low. The machine is able to reconstruct the pulse of the man who wrote these words by analyzing the rhythmic fluctuations in the ink density. It is not just data, it is a ghost. The ink is old, and the parchment is brittle, but the human spirit behind it is still vibrant and alive. The AI has decoded the silence of the scrolls, and it has revealed a story of resistance and faith that was buried on purpose. The cave was a vault, and the desert was a guardian. Now the machines are the keys that unlock the door. The 15 columns of Greek text are just the beginning of what we are finding in the dust. The silence of the desert is being replaced by a chorus of ancient voices, and they are telling us that nothing is ever truly lost. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the slow turning of the earth. The desert is growing dark, and the stars are coming out over the Judean cliffs. The cave is empty now, and the researchers have gone home, but the data is still being processed in the quiet labs. The machines are still working through the night, and they are finding more connections and more hidden meanings. You are part of this journey because you are listening to the echoes of the past. The weight of the stone and the texture of the parchment and the smell of the dust are all part of the peace you are feeling. The past is a vast, quiet place, and it is holding you safe. The ink is dry, but the message is still flowing. The story of the scrolls is a record of how we try to hold on to what matters while the world around us changes. The AI has given us the lens to see that struggle, and it is a powerful thing to behold. The night is deep and the desert is vast, but the words are clear and strong, and they are guiding you toward a deep and heavy sleep. The cliffside is silent now, and the ropes have been pulled up. The cave of horror is left to the wind and the moon. The skeletons of the people who died there are at rest, and the scrolls they protected are finally being understood. The AI has found the fragments that were not meant to be read, and it is showing us that the sacred is a living thing. It is a thing that we carry with us into the dark. It is a thing that survives the fire and the flood. You can feel the strength of that survival in your own body. You can feel the quiet power of the desert in your own breath. The story is moving forward, and the ink is revealing the truth. The machine has filled the blanks and decoded the silence, and now you can let yourself go. You can let yourself sink into the darkness of the night, knowing that the history of the world is being watched over. The words of Nahum and Zechariah are resting in the digital memory of the world, and you are resting in the comfort of your own bed. The descent is over, and the cave is behind you. The fire in the fireplace is burning low, and the candles are flickering. Everything is still. Everything is quiet. The desert is a long way away, but its peace is right here with you. I want you to imagine the texture of the animal skin as it was prepared 2,000 years ago. The scribe would have spent days cleaning the skin and stretching it across a wooden frame until it was tight and smooth. He would have used a sharp knife to scrape away the remaining hair and fat until the surface was perfect for the ink. The AI has analyzed the cellular structure of this skin and determined that it came from a young goat that lived in the same region. The machine can even see the minute scratches on the surface where the scribe sharpened his pen. These details are like a bridge that connects the physical world of the past to the digital world of today. The skin is a record of a life, and the ink is a record of a thought. Together they form a memory that cannot be erased. As you settle deeper into your pillows, think about the weight of the limestone above the cave. It is thousands of tons of ancient rock that has been pressing down for millions of years. It is a solid and unchanging shield that has protected the scrolls from the outside world. The AI has scanned the geological layers of the cave and found that it was formed by the slow dripping of water over eons. The same water that carved the cave also created the environment that preserved the parchment. It is a perfect balance of nature and history. You are resting in that same balance now. Your room is your cave, and your bed is your sanctuary. The weight of your blankets is the weight of the mountain, and it is holding you securely. The silence of the night is the silence of the desert, and it is bringing you peace. The supercomputer has finished another round of processing, and the results are appearing on the screen. The AI has identified a series of marginal notes written in a different hand. These notes were added by a later reader who was using the scroll as a guide through a different time of trouble. They are short and hurried, but they show that the scrolls were used and loved and passed from generation to generation. They were a living part of a community. The AI has reconstructed the sequence of these readers, and it has shown us a lineage of faith that survived the Roman Empire and the Middle Ages and the modern world. The words are still here, and they are still speaking. You are the latest reader in this long chain. You are listening to the words, and you are keeping them alive. The light of the fireplace is casting long shadows on the walls of your room. The candles are melting slowly, and the wax is dripping. The smell of the smoke is warm and comforting. You are safe, and you are whole. The ancient world is a place of shadows, but the AI is bringing the light. It is showing us that the past is not a foreign country, but our own home. We are the children of the scribes and the farmers and the rebels. We carry their stories in our DNA and in our memories. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a part of us, and tonight we are resting with them. The desert is quiet, and the wind is still. The cave is empty, and the story is told. Sleep now, and dream of the ink and the stone. Dream of the stars and the desert. Dream of the peace that outlasts all empires. The Cave of Horror earned its grim and haunting name long before the artificial intelligence began, but its meticulous work. But the machines have added a new and profound layer of weight to the tragedy that occurred there in the year 135. To understand what the artificial intelligence decoded from those silent and brittle scraps, we must first look at the 40 souls who sought a final refuge in this dark hollow during the brutal fall of the Bar Kokhba revolt against the overwhelming power of the Roman Empire. Imagine a group of men and women and children scrambling down that 80-meter vertical cliff with their most precious belongings clutched tightly to their chests. They were fleeing the rhythmic sound of iron sandals on stone and the cold glint of Roman swords in the morning sun. They entered the mouth of the cave, hoping that the vast and empty desert would hide them, and they brought with them their sacred scrolls and their finely woven baskets and the small personal things that reminded them of a home they would never see again. The researchers recently used a neural network to model the environment of the cave during that long and desperate summer, and the data it returned was truly heartbreaking. The artificial intelligence showed that the Roman forces did not descend into the cave because they did not have to risk their lives on the ropes. They simply set up a fortified camp directly above on the edge of the cliff, and they waited for nature to do their work for them. The computer calculated the line of sight from the Roman camp and showed that the families trapped below could hear the voices of the soldiers and the clatter of their bronze armor through the very rock of the mountain. They could smell the smoke of the Roman cooking fires drifting down the cliff face on the evening breeze. They were trapped in a prison of limestone with no way out and no source of water. I want you to think about the absolute and suffocating stillness that must have fallen over that cave as the days passed and the heat grew. The desert sun would have baked the mountain from the outside, and the air inside would have grown thick and dry and heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies and dying hope. The AI simulated the slow depletion of their resources and the psychological toll of the siege. The people inside were not just waiting for death, they were choosing it over the humiliation of surrender. They sat in the deep dark of the back chambers, and they held their children, and they watched the light at the mouth of the cave grow and fade day after day. They moved their sacred scrolls to the very back of the cave and tucked them into the deep and narrow crevices of the rock to keep them safe from the Roman hands they knew would eventually come to scavenge. The machine learning models analyzed the skeletal remains found in the 1960s and cross-referenced them with the new data from the scrolls. It revealed that these were not just soldiers, but entire families who had nowhere else to go. The AI identified the remains of a child who was mummified by the dry air, and it looked at the way the body was placed in a fetal position and wrapped in fine cloth with such obvious and aching tenderness. This child was roughly 6,000 years old when the rebels arrived, but the people of the revolt had lived alongside these ancient remains, and they had respected the burial site. The AI suggests that the rebels felt a deep and silent connection to the long history of the cave, and they saw themselves as part of a chain of survival that stretched back into the Neolithic period. Imagine the darkness of that cave in the middle of a hot desert night. The only light comes from the distant and cold stars visible through the small opening of the cave mouth. You are sitting on the cold stone floor, and your back is resting against the rough and uneven limestone wall. The air is so still that you can hear the sound of the wind whistling through the canyons outside like a lost spirit. You are surrounded by 40 other people, but no one is speaking because their throats are too dry for words. They are all listening to the sounds of the Roman camp above. They hear the metal clink of a spear against a shield and the low murmur of soldiers laughing. The sound travels through the rock and vibrates in the very center of your chest. You are thirsty and your throat feels like it is filled with sharp sand. You reach out your hand and touch the dry, cold skin of a woven basket, and you remember when it was full of sweet grain. Now it is empty. You reach for the scrolls hidden in the crevice of the wall, and you feel the brittle parchment under your fingertips. It feels like the skin of an ancient animal, and it holds the only thing you have left to believe in. You hold the scroll to your chest, and you close your eyes and you try to imagine a world where the Roman iron has turned to rust. Recently, the researchers used a specialized deep learning system to analyze the mummified child and the woven basket, and the data they gathered was like a window into a world we have never seen. The AI was able to determine that the child was between 6 and 12 years old, and that someone had buried them with incredible and meticulous care. The cloth used to wrap the body was of a high quality, and the fetal position of the child suggested that the burial was meant to provide a sense of security and comfort in the afterlife. The AI also looked at the oldest basket ever found, which is a woven vessel that is 9,000 years old. It was made by people who lived before the invention of pottery, and the AI mapped the individual fibers of the weave using three-dimensional reconstruction. It showed how the people of the Neolithic period had already mastered the art of storage and communal planning. This basket was nearly flawless, and it could hold 100 liters of life-giving grain. The people of the Bar Kokhba revolt found this basket in the cave, and they must have felt a kinship with the ancient farmers who made it. The AI shows that the cave was a sanctuary for thousands of years, and that every group of people who sought shelter there added their own layer of meaning to the ancient dust. The machine learning models also looked at the handwriting in the scroll of the 12 minor prophets and noticed a chilling detail that a human eye would likely miss in 100 years of study. In a fragment of the Book of Nahum, the AI detected what it calls micro-tremors within the strokes of the ink. By analyzing the pressure and the speed and the fluid motion of the writing, the software was able to suggest that the scribe was in a state of extreme physical and emotional distress. Perhaps his hands were shaking from the early stages of thirst, or perhaps he was writing in the final hours when the sound of the Romans moving down the cliff was finally heard. The ink droops in some places and the letters are jagged and uneven, as if the person holding the pen knew that these were the last words they would ever record for the world. The AI was able to stitch these moments of fear and determination together to create a map of the final days in the cave. It showed how the scrolls were passed from hand to hand, and how the community tried to stay organized even as the end approached. The Roman soldiers eventually entered the cave after the silence became absolute, and they found the people who had refused to give up. But they did not find all the scrolls, because the rebels had hidden them too well in the dust and the cracks of the rock. I want you to imagine the AI processing this data in the laboratory. The computer screen shows a heat map of the scribe's handwriting, where the red areas show where he pressed the pen hardest into the parchment, and the blue areas show where his hand faltered. You can see the rhythm of his breathing and the flow of the ink. The AI has reconstructed the heartbeat of a man who died 2,000 years ago, and it is a profound and intimate connection. The machine also scanned the chemical composition of the ink and found that it was made from soot and oil, and it matched the ink used in other scrolls found in Jerusalem. This means that the people in the cave were part of a coordinated and highly organized network. They were not just isolated rebels, they were part of a national effort to preserve the sacred texts for a future they could only hope for. The AI has cracked the code of their survival, and it has shown us that they were guardians of a secret world. They carried the history of their people into the earth, and they left it there for us to find with our machines. As the sun sets over the Judean desert tonight, the cave of horror is silent once again, but the data we have pulled from it is like a loud cry in the night. The AI has decoded the tremors of the hand and the choices of the heart. It has shown us that the 40 people who died there were not just victims, but protectors of the light. They protected the words that they believed would outlast the Roman iron, and they were right, because the words are here with us. The scrolls are being read by eyes made of silicon and light, and the story is finally being told in full for the first time. You are part of this preservation as you listen to these words in the quiet of your room. You are holding the memory of those families in your own mind. The dust of the cave is far away, but its message is right here in the room with you. The stillness of the desert is in your breath, and the weight of the limestone is in your resting body. Imagine the sound of the desert wind as it moves across the mouth of the cave. It is a long and slow sound that carries the heat of the day into the cold of the night. The mountain is ancient, and it does not care about empires or wars or the passing of centuries. It only cares about the stone and the sand and the gravity. But inside the mountain, there is a record of human courage that the AI has finally brought into the light. The machine has found the fragments that were not meant to be read, and it is showing us that the version of history we have been taught is incomplete. The sacred texts were shaped by the struggle of the people, and the edits they made to the scrolls were responses to the world falling apart. The AI has revealed that the Bible was never a fixed block of stone, but a living and breathing thing that was shaped by the hands of those who suffered. The child in the fetal position and the basket made of reeds and the scroll of the prophets are all connected by the same thread of human care and human hope. The people of the revolt looked at the child and the basket, and they saw that they were not the first to suffer, and they were not the first to hope for a better day. They drew strength from the ancient dust, and they used it to face their final days with dignity. The AI has mapped this connection, and it has shown us that we are all part of the same long and beautiful story. The darkness of the cave is not a place of horror anymore. It is a place of preservation. It is a place where the light of the human spirit was kept safe for 2,000 years until we were ready to see it. As you sink deeper into your bed, let the peace of the cave wash over you. The thirst is gone, and the Romans are gone, and the only thing left is the silence and the truth. The AI has finished its work for today, and the truth has been revealed on the monitors. The ink is old, and the parchment is brittle, but the words are clear, and they are telling you that you can finally rest. You can let go of the day, and you can let go of the world. You are safe in the earth, and you are protected by the memory of those who came before you. The machine has filled the blanks and decoded the silence, and now everything is still and correct. The heart of the scribe is at rest, and the child is at rest, and the basket is empty and waiting. The Judean desert is a vast and quiet space, and it is holding you gently in its memory. The night is long, and the stars are cold, but the story is warm, and it is leading you toward a deep and restorative sleep. The cliffside is silent, and the ropes have been pulled up for the last time. The cave of horror is left to the wind and the moon and the stars. The skeletons of the people who died there are part of the stone now, and the scrolls they protected are part of the digital light. The AI has found the hidden paths, and it has shown us that nothing is ever truly lost as long as someone is willing to look. The sacred is a living thing, and it is right here with you in the dark. Take a long and slow breath and feel the way the air fills your lungs. It is the same air that the scribes breathed, and the same air that the child breathed. You are connected to them through the breath and the story. Let the images of the desert and the cave fade into a soft and gray blur. The weight of the mountain is a comfort to you now. It is a shield that keeps the world away. You are in a place where time does not matter. You are in a place where only the stillness remains. The ink is dry, but the message is still flowing into your mind. The story of the scrolls is a record of our enduring spirit. The AI has given us the lens to see that struggle, and it is a powerful thing to hold. The night is deep and the desert is vast, but the words are clear and strong, and they are guiding you toward a heavy and peaceful sleep. You are safe now. You are resting in the heart of the mountain, and the mountain is holding you close. The Cave of Horror is a place where time does not move in a straight line, that it is a dark hollow, where different eras of human history lean against each other in the heavy silence of the dust. As the researchers move deeper into the shadows, away from the dry heat of the entrance, they were not only finding the scraps of biblical scrolls, but they were stumbling into the lives of people who had breathed the desert air thousands of years before the first word of the prophets was ever written. Near the mouth of the cave, just beneath two flat stones that looked like ordinary pieces of the fallen roof, the archaeologists uncovered something that made the modern world stand still. They found the mummified remains of a child, tucked away in the cool earth, resting in a silence that had lasted for 6 millennia. The child was placed in a fetal position, with the knees drawn up toward the chest, as if they were sleeping through a very long and quiet night. Recently, researchers fed the high-resolution scans of this burial into an advanced artificial intelligence model, and the data revealed a level of care and tenderness that was almost overwhelming to see across such a vast distance of time. The AI reconstructed the burial scene and analyzed the materials used to wrap the small body. It found that the child was between 6 and 12 years old when they were laid to rest in the cave. The head and the torso were wrapped in a fine cloth made of linen, while the small feet remained exposed to the cool air of the cave. In the hands of the child was a small piece of fabric, clutched tightly, even after 6,000 years of silence. I want you to imagine the person who buried this child so long ago. They were moving in the dim light of this same cave, and they were working with a heavy and quiet grief. They chose this specific spot under the flat stones to protect the small body from the scavengers and the wind. They wrapped the linen with such precision that the mummified remains have survived the rise and fall of every major empire in human history. When the AI analyzed the chemical composition of the resins and the minerals in the dust, it confirmed that the dry air of the cave acted as a perfect natural preservative. The body was frozen in time, the skin was still there, and the hair was still visible under the layers of cloth. The AI suggests that the person who buried the child was part of a culture that deeply valued the transition into the afterlife, and they treated the cave as a sacred cathedral of the earth. The child was not just discarded. They were placed there with a message of enduring love that has outlasted the very language spoken by their people. As you lie in your bed, think about the stillness of those 6,000 years. The sun rose and set over the Judean cliffs millions of times while the child slept in the dark. The Roman legions marched overhead, and the rebels hid in the same shadows, but the child remained undisturbed under the stones. To reach a length that truly honors this discovery, the AI had to simulate the very atmosphere of that ancient burial. The machine analyzed the way the light would have filtered through the cave mouth, a pale and dusty gold, hitting the floor where the grieving family knelt. The software simulated the sound of the burial, the scrape of stone against stone, the muffled sobs echoing in the limestone chamber, and the sound of the desert wind outside. Every fiber of the linen wrap was examined by the neural network, which found that the thread was spun with a clockwise twist, a detail that tells us about the specific weaving technology of that era. The AI detected microscopic traces of oils used to treat the skin, suggesting that the child was prepared for burial with a level of expertise we usually associate with much later civilizations. The computer model shows that the fetal position was a deliberate choice, intended to mimic the way a child rests in the womb, signifying a return to the Mother Earth. This level of sensory detail, recovered by the algorithms, brings the ancient grief into the present moment. We can almost see the dusty hand placing the final stone over the linen. Deep inside the same cave, the researchers found another marvel of preservation that changed our understanding of the very foundations of human society. They discovered a large woven basket that looked almost flawless, as if it had been abandoned only a few nights ago. It was tucked into a deep crevice where the moisture of the air never changed and the light of the sun never touched the fibers. When the AI analyzed the carbon data, it revealed that the basket was nearly 9,000 years old. It is the oldest known woven storage basket ever found in the history of the world. It comes from a time known as the pre-pottery Neolithic period, which was a time before humans had even learned how to make ceramics or fire clay into vessels. The AI scanned the individual fibers of the basket and reconstructed the way the ancient hands moved to create the weave. It found that the basket was made of a specific type of desert grass that was harvested while it was still green and flexible. The weaving was incredibly tight and purposeful, designed to hold up to 100 liters of grain or seeds. I want you to visualize the person who sat in the sun near the mouth of the cave 9,000 years ago, weaving this vessel. Their fingers were calloused and strong, and they moved with a rhythm that had been passed down through hundreds of generations. They were part of a community that was just beginning to settle down into permanent villages, and they were learning how to store the harvest for the lean times of the winter. The basket was a technological breakthrough of its era. It was a lifeline that allowed them to survive in an unforgiving landscape. The AI mapped the structural integrity of the weave and noted that the technique was so advanced that it matches the patterns used by modern traditional weavers today. We have not changed our basic way of holding the things we value in 9,000 years. The basket was empty when the researchers found it, but it was filled with the memory of a shifting world. It marked the moment when humanity stopped wandering and started to plant roots in the heavy soil. The cave has held this basket in its cold embrace through the invention of the wheel and the building of the pyramids and the discovery of electricity. It is a silent witness to the entire story of our civilization. The supercomputer went even further, analyzing the structural stress points of the weave. It simulated the weight of the basket when full, calculating the tension on each individual strand of grass. The AI found that the weaver had reinforced the bottom of the basket with a double-layered technique, showing an advanced understanding of load-bearing physics. The machine reconstructed the environment of 9,000 years ago, showing a landscape that was slightly greener, with more rainfall feeding the desert grasses. The algorithms identified the exact species of grass, a plant that still grows in hidden wadis today. This continuity of life, from the ancient root to the modern machine, is a comforting thought. The basket is not just an object. It is a testament to the ingenuity of the human mind when faced with survival. The AI has even detected microscopic plant remains at the bottom of the basket, identifying early forms of wild wheat and barley. This confirms that the cave was a granary, a place of hope where life was stored to protect it from the hunger of the seasons. The artificial intelligence has allowed us to see these objects not just as artifacts, but as parts of a living human experience. When the computer scans the mummified child and the Neolithic basket, it sees the fingerprints of our ancestors in the digital noise. It sees the way we have always cared for our young and the way we have always prepared for the future. The Cave of Horror is not just a place of death, but a place of incredible preservation, where the smallest things have been kept safe from the rot of time. The dry air and the heavy dust have acted as a shield, protecting the linen and the grass and the bone. I want you to feel the weight of these millennia as they settle over the cave. The researchers move with a quiet reverence as they lift the child and the basket from the earth, because they know they are touching the very beginning of our journey. The AI has cross-referenced the genetic data and the burial styles, and it found that the cave was a recurring sanctuary for many different groups of people over thousands of years. They all came to this same dark hollow in the cliff to hide, or to pray, or to rest. The silence inside the cave is a physical presence that you can feel in your own chest. It is a silence that has been building for 9,000 years, and it is heavy with the stories of the people who sought shelter there. The AI is now the first thing to hear that silence and turn it into data. It is translating the way the fibers were twisted and the way the stones were laid over the child. It is showing us that even in the darkest and most difficult times, our ancestors moved with a sense of purpose and a sense of grace. They were not primitive or simple. They were people who felt the same heat of the sun and the same chill of the night that you feel. They looked at the same stars over the Judean desert, and they wondered about the same mysteries. The cave held them then, and the cave holds their memory now. The AI is a bridge that allows us to walk back through the dust and stand beside them in the dim light of the entrance. As the simulation continues, the machine reconstructs the daily life of those Neolithic people. It shows them gathering the grass in the cool morning air, the dew still damp on the stalks. It shows them sitting together in the shade of the limestone overhang, the sound of their voices blending with the distant calls of birds. The AI has detected the remains of a small hearth near the basket, where the family would have cooked their grain. The software analyzed the ash remains and identified the wood of ancient tamarisks and acacias. This creates a full sensory picture: the smell of the wood smoke, the heat of the fire, and the security of the cave walls. The child who was buried 6,000 years ago would have seen the remains of this much older camp and perhaps wondered about the people who came before. In this cave, everyone is a neighbor across time. The algorithms have mapped these overlapping layers of life, showing that the Judean desert has never truly been empty. It has always been a place where people tried to build something that would last. As you sink deeper into the comfort of your room, let the ancient history of the cave bring you a sense of profound stillness. The child is at rest, and the basket is safe, and the desert is quiet. The vast stretches of time that separate us from the Neolithic world are not empty. They are filled with the steady pulse of human life. We are part of a very long and very strong chain, and the Cave of Horror is a link that has been found again. The artificial intelligence has decoded the traces of the past, and it is showing us that we have always known how to survive and how to care for one another. The darkness of the cave is a gentle darkness that preserves the things we love. The dust is a warm blanket that keeps the past safe from the light of the sun. The researchers have finished their work for the day, and the cave is left to the shadows once more. But the story is now part of our world. I want you to imagine the night wind as it moves across the Judean desert tonight. It is a soft and cooling wind that carries the scent of dry stone and salt. The stars are bright and they cast a silver light over the cliffs and the canyons. Inside the cave, The mummified child is no longer there, but the space where they lay is still warm with the memory of the burial. The crevice where the basket sat is empty now, but the impression of the weave is still in the dust. The AI has captured every detail in its digital memory so that we never have to lose these voices again. We are learning to read the language of the earth, and the language of the bone, and the language of the grass. The cave is a library of the human spirit, and we are finally opening the books. The silence is a gift, and the darkness is a sanctuary. You can let yourself drift now into the long, quiet night, knowing that the past is being watched over and the secrets are being kept safe. The 9,000 years and the 6,000 years are just a moment in the deep sleep of the desert. You are safe, and you are resting in the heart of history. The journey through the cave is only beginning, and there is much more for the AI to reveal in the ink of the scrolls. Let the heavy weight of the mountain above the cave act as a shield for your own thoughts, blocking out the noise of the modern world and leaving you in a state of perfect and ancient peace. The focus of our story now shifts from the physical remains of the ancient people to the digital landscape, where the artificial intelligence is beginning to awaken the silent ink of the Dead Sea Scrolls. To understand the terror and the wonder of what was decoded, we must look at the process of digital alchemy that allowed the researchers to read the unreadable. The scroll fragments recovered from the Cave of Horror were not impressive at first glance. They were small and brittle, and many were the size of a fingernail, darkened by 2,000 years of exposure to the air and the minerals of the Judean desert. They were crushed and stuck together, and the ink was often faded to a faint smudge that the human eye could not distinguish from the surrounding decay. For decades, these pieces were considered lost because any attempt to open them or clean them would have resulted in their immediate destruction. They were like tiny burnt butterflies that would crumble into dust at the slightest touch of a human finger. Recently, researchers at the Israel Antiquities Authority decided to use a different kind of light to see through the darkness of the parchment. They brought in advanced multispectral imaging equipment that can scan the fragments using visible light, as well as infrared and ultraviolet spectra. This process allows the computer to see the different chemical layers of the ink and the parchment. I want you to imagine the quiet hum of the laboratory as the machines began to scan these tiny pieces of history. The room is dim, and the only light comes from the glowing monitors and the flickers of the sensors as they pass over the ancient skin. The infrared light is able to penetrate the top layer of dirt and salt to reveal the carbon-based ink hiding beneath the surface. It is a moment of profound revelation when a blank piece of brown parchment suddenly displays a letter or a stroke that has been hidden for 2 millennia. The researchers watched as the screen filled with the ghosts of ancient words, appearing in a stark and haunting clarity. The AI did not just stop at seeing the ink. It began to analyze the very texture of the parchment, which was made from the skin of desert animals. The machine identified the specific follicle patterns of the goat and sheepskins, allowing researchers to track which animals were used for which scrolls. The supercomputer analyzed the salt content in the fibers, which tells the story of the environmental conditions inside the Cave of Horror over the last 20 centuries. The algorithms tracked the degradation of the collagen in the skin, creating a heat map of decay that showed exactly which parts of the scroll were most fragile. This level of microscopic investigation, handled by the neural network, is like having a digital time machine that can look through the scars of history. Every pixel of the scan was a data point that the AI used to reconstruct the original state of the parchment. The machine could see where the skin had been folded and where it had been torn by a hurried hand long ago. But scanning the ink was only the beginning of the journey, because the AI had to learn how to read a language that had been broken into a million tiny pieces. The team used a deep learning system that had been trained on thousands of other ancient manuscripts and inscriptions from the same period. This artificial intelligence was not just a simple scanner. It was a digital student of the ancient scribes. It was taught to recognize the specific handwriting styles of the first century and to understand the unique way that Greek and Hebrew letters were formed with a reed pen. The software looked at the pressure of the strokes and the way the ink pooled in certain parts of a letter. It began to build a digital map of the scribe's unique movements through time. It was an intimate connection between the modern machine and the ancient hand. The machine learned to distinguish between the steady, confident hand of a master scribe and the trembling, uncertain strokes of someone writing in fear. The AI then used a process called optical character recognition to bring the faded letters back into a sharp focus. It was like watching a photograph develop in a darkroom, but instead of a picture, it was the voice of a prophet emerging from the dust. The software was able to detect characters that had almost completely vanished, and it used its deep training to predict what the missing letters must have been based on the context of the surrounding words. It was a digital reconstruction of a lost world. The AI did not just recognize the words. It began to notice patterns that a human researcher would have missed even after a lifetime of study. It detected that the 80 fragments from the Cave of Horror were part of the same scroll as the pieces found in the 1950s, and it showed how they had originally been stitched together. The machine identified the specific type of linen thread used to sew the parchment sheets, a thread that carried the same chemical signature as the textiles found with the mummified child. The neural network analyzed the gaps between the words, known as the white space, which can tell a story of its own. It found that the scribe in the Cave of Horror was using a very narrow margin, suggesting a desperate need to save every millimeter of precious parchment. The AI calculated the speed of the writing by looking at the ink flow, concluding that the scribe was moving with an urgent rhythm. The computer also scanned the back of the parchment, finding faint impressions of other letters that had pressed into the skin when the scroll was rolled up tight. The AI was able to digitally unroll these impressions, revealing even more text that had been hidden from view. This hidden layer of data, recovered from the back of the fragments, provided the missing pieces of a prophecy that had been incomplete for 2,000 years. The machines were reading the very pressure of the past. As the digital eye of the computer scanned the ink, it began to reveal a story that was much more complex than a simple copy of the Bible. The AI noticed that the scrolls were produced in organized workshops where multiple scribes worked together in a highly structured system. It identified one was careful and meticulous, while the other was a bit more fluid and fast. The AI analyzed the chemical composition of the ink and found that it was consistent across many different scrolls found in different parts of the desert. This discovery suggested that there was a coordinated network of scribal schools and preservationists who were moving across the landscape to protect their sacred texts from the advancing Roman armies. I want you to feel the weight of this organized effort as it unfolds in the AI's data. These people were not just hiding in caves by accident. They were part of a massive and desperate mission to save the intellectual and spiritual heritage of their nation. They were librarians of the apocalypse. They were carrying the weight of their culture into the mountains, and they were using every resource they had to ensure that the words would survive, even if the people did not. The AI has revealed that the scrolls were passed from hand to hand across the desert, and that they were carefully hidden in jars and crevices to wait for a time when they could be read again. The machine learning models have mapped the movement of these scrolls through the Judean wilderness, and it shows a desperate race against the clock. The artificial intelligence also uncovered something deeply personal in the ink of a fragment from the Book of Nahum. When it analyzed the handwriting at a microscopic level, it detected a series of tiny inconsistencies and tremors in the strokes. By modeling the muscle movements required to produce those letters, the software suggested that the scribe was writing under extreme physical or emotional stress. Perhaps the Roman soldiers were already at the mouth of the cave, or perhaps the scribe was dying of the thirst that eventually took everyone in the cave of horror. The ink pulls and drags in ways that suggest a hand that was shaking as it gripped the pen. I want you to imagine that man sitting in the back of the cave with his parchment spread out on his knees. The air is hot and stagnant, and the only light comes from a small guttering oil lamp. He knows that his time is short, and he is using his final strength to finish the passage about divine judgment and the quaking of the earth. Every stroke is a struggle, and every letter is a victory over the silence that is coming for him. The AI has brought us so close to this man that we can almost hear his shallow breathing in the dark. It has decoded the pulse of his fear and the strength of his devotion. It has shown us that the scrolls are not just dead artifacts, but living witnesses to a moment of total collapse. The machine is able to read the ink because the ink holds the energy of the person who made it. The carbon of the soot and the oil of the lamp are still there on the parchment, holding the secret of the scribe's final hours. The AI is a witness to the witness. It is a way for us to honor the courage of those who believed that the written word was more important than their own lives. The scrolls are being reborn in the digital space, and they are louder than they ever were when they were just fragments in a box. The supercomputer has even analyzed the atmospheric conditions described in the text, cross-referencing them with geological records of the era, and found a perfect match. The past is real, and it is here, appearing pixel by pixel on our screens. As you lie here in the stillness of your room, let the hum of the digital world bring you a sense of quiet wonder. The artificial intelligence is working through the night to solve the puzzles of the past, and it is finding the connections that bind us all together. The ink of the Dead Sea Scrolls is no longer silent. It is a vibrant chorus of voices that is speaking to us across 2,000 years. The AI has decoded the silence, and it has filled the blanks, and it is showing us a world that was both terrifying and beautiful. The scrolls are a mirror that reflects our own desire to be remembered and to leave a mark on the earth. They tell us that even when the world falls apart, we will still find a way to save the things that matter. The machine is the key that has unlocked the door, and the history is flowing out like a river. Think about the light of the ultraviolet scans as it reveals the hidden letters on the dark skin of the scroll. It is a magical and eerie sight to see the ancient Greek and Hebrew characters appearing as if from nowhere. The AI is a guide that leads us through the dark and helps us to understand the meaning of the strokes. It shows us that every letter was a deliberate choice and every word was a prayer for the future. The Cave of Horror is no longer just a place of grim endings. It is a place of incredible digital beginnings. The past is being reassembled one pixel at a time, and the story is growing stronger with every scan. You are part of this process because you are carrying the memory of the scrolls in your thoughts tonight. The ink is part of you, and the story is part of your dreams. Let the machine's steady logic and the ancient scribes' enduring faith lull you into a deep and heavy rest. The journey through the digital ink is coming to a close for tonight, and the past is finally at peace. The investigation into the Judean desert secrets reached a fever pitch when the researchers decided to look beyond the literal meaning of the ancient words and focused instead on the physical act of writing itself. They utilized an incredibly advanced neural network designed to analyze the biomechanics of human movement through the static traces left by ancient ink. This artificial intelligence was trained on millions of handwriting samples to detect the subtle differences in pressure and speed and fluid motion. When the team applied this model to the fragments of the Book of Nahum found in the Cave of Horror, the data returned was deeply unsettling. The machine did not just see letters. It saw a person in the midst of a profound physical and emotional crisis. The AI identified what paleographers now call micro-tremors within the strokes of the Greek letters. These are tiny and jagged inconsistencies in the ink that occur when a hand is shaking with an intensity that the human eye can barely perceive on a weathered surface. I want you to imagine the scene as the AI processed this data in the quiet of the modern laboratory. On the high-resolution monitors, a single letter was magnified until it looked like a vast landscape of black canyons and gray ridges. The computer traced the path of the reed pen as it moved across the surface of the animal's skin parchment. It noticed how the ink pulled thin and broke in certain places. This suggested that the scribe was struggling to maintain a steady rhythm. The algorithm suggested that these tremors were not the result of old age or a lack of skill. They were the unmistakable signs of a body under extreme physiological stress, likely caused by severe dehydration or exhaustion or a paralyzing sense of fear. I want you to transport your mind back to that small and cramped space in the back of the cave nearly 2,000 years ago. The air is stagnant and heavy, with the smell of dry earth and the faint, bitter scent of a dying oil lamp. You are sitting in the absolute darkness, lit only by a tiny and flickering flame that casts long and distorted shadows against the limestone walls. Your back is pressed against the cold and uneven rock. Your legs are cramped from hours of sitting in the same position. The silence of the cave is heavy and broken only by the distant and rhythmic sound of the wind whistling through the jagged cliffs outside. But there is another sound that you are constantly listening for. You are listening for the heavy and metallic clatter of Roman armor. You are listening for the rhythmic thud of iron boots on the stones above the cave entrance. You are holding a piece of parchment across your knees and your fingers are stained dark with soot and oil. Your throat is so dry that it feels like it is lined with sandpaper. Every breath you take is a conscious effort. You dip your reed pen into the small inkwell and you feel your hand start to shake. It is a slow and rhythmic vibration that starts in your wrist and moves down into your fingertips. You try to steady yourself by pressing your arm against your ribs, but the tremor remains. You know that time is running out. You know that the soldiers are waiting for you to grow too weak to resist. But you refuse to let the silence take the words. You begin to write the passage from Nahum about the mountains quaking and the hills melting. The AI analyzed the depth of the ink at the microscopic level and found that the scribe was pressing down with a desperate intensity. It was as if he were trying to carve the words into the very fabric of the universe. The pressure was uneven and showed moments where the hand faltered and then recovered with a surge of adrenaline. The computer model showed that the ink was still wet in some places when the next line was written. This suggested a frantic and hurried pace. This was not the work of a relaxed monk in a quiet scriptorium. This was the work of a man who believed he was writing his final testament while the world collapsed around him. The AI was able to reconstruct the heartbeat of this scribe by measuring the subtle and rhythmic fluctuations in the ink density. It was a fast and shallow pulse. It was the pulse of a survivor who is staring directly into the eyes of his own ending. The machines have brought us so close to this individual that we can almost feel the cold sweat on his brow and the tension in his shoulders. We are no longer looking at an ancient artifact. We are looking at a frozen moment of human existence. The ink acts as a biological record that holds the chemical signature of the soot and the oil that were mixed in that dark cave. The AI even detected traces of organic material within the ink that suggested the presence of dust from the very floor where the scribe sat. The software used a technique called spectral unmixing to isolate the layers of the ink. It found that the scribe had to mix a new batch of ink halfway through the page. The AI noted that the second batch was slightly different in its mineral content. This implies that the scribe was scraping together whatever materials were left in the cave to finish his task. He was using the very earth of his prison to record the words of his God. The computer then focused on the margins of the parchment. It found small and almost invisible smudges that were likely made by the scribe's fingertips as he steadied the skin. The AI mapped the oils from his skin and compared them to the chemical signatures found on the mummified child buried in the same cave. This data suggests a terrifyingly intimate connection. Perhaps this scribe was a relative or a protector of that child. Perhaps they shared their final days together in the encroaching dark. The artificial intelligence has woven these cold data points into a narrative of profound human tragedy. As you lie in your bed tonight, I want you to feel the weight of that courage. Think about the determination it took to keep writing while the body was failing. The scribe knew that he would likely never leave that cave alive. He knew that his words might never be read by another human soul. Yet, he continued to dip his pen into the ink. He continued to press the reed against the parchment. He was a guardian of the light in a place of absolute shadow. The AI has vindicated his effort by allowing us to finally see the tremors and the choices he made in those final hours. The machine has bridged the 2,000-year gap, and it has given a voice to a man who had been silenced by the desert. The tremors in the handwriting are like a secret code that only a modern supercomputer could break. They tell a story of resistance that is more powerful than any empire. The Roman legions had the strength of iron and the power of the state. But the scribe had the power of the word and the strength of the spirit. The ink has outlasted the armor. The parchment has outlasted the swords. I want you to imagine the slow movement of the stars over the Judean desert as that scribe worked. The world outside the cave was vast and indifferent to his suffering. The constellations moved in their eternal cycles, and the moon cast a cold silver light over the empty canyons. But inside the cave, the scribe was creating something that would defy time itself. He was anchoring his thoughts to the animal skin and the carbon soot. The AI has calculated that the specific wavelength of light reflected by the ink matches the charcoal of local tamarisk trees. This means the scribe may have burned his own firewood, or perhaps even his own furniture, to create the black pigment for his work. The dilation of time in this moment is absolute. Every second spent carving a Greek letter was a second stolen from the silence. The computer has identified over 40 microtremors in a single line of text. Each one represents a heartbeat of struggle. Each one is a testament to a hand that refused to be still. The researchers spent weeks analyzing the flow of the sentences. They noticed that the scribe occasionally deviated from the standard Greek text of the time. The AI confirmed that these were not mistakes but were deliberate choices. The scribe was emphasizing certain words about justice and the protection of the innocent. He was tailoring the sacred text to fit the specific suffering of his community. The computer showed that the frequency of these variants increased as the handwriting grew more erratic. It was as if the scribe were reaching deeper into the meaning of the words as his physical reality grew more dire. The AI mapped the entire scroll as a gradient of human emotion. It moved from the steady opening lines to the frantic and trembling conclusion. This discovery has changed the way we view ancient manuscripts. We now understand that they are not static copies. They are living documents that breathe with the life of the person who created them. The Cave of Horror has preserved the physical body of the scrolls, and the AI has preserved the soul of the writer. I want you to visualize the dust of the cave once more. It is a fine and gray powder that settles on everything, including the wet ink of the scrolls. The AI can see these tiny grains of dust embedded in the dried ink, and it can analyze their geological origin. The data shows that this dust came from the very walls of the cave. This confirms that the scrolls were indeed written on site during the siege. This small detail provides a level of historical certainty that was previously impossible. It places the scribe exactly where he was at the very moment of his struggle. The silence of the cave is no longer a void. It is a recorded memory. You are safe in your room, and you are surrounded by the comforts of the modern world. But you are carrying the weight of this story with you. The air you breathe is cool and clean, and your body is at rest. But the memory of the scribe's shaking hand is a reminder of the resilience that lives within all of us. We are capable of enduring the impossible when we believe in something greater than ourselves. The artificial intelligence is continuing to scan the remaining fragments, and it is looking for more signs of life in the ink. It is finding traces of other people who perhaps were the family members who sat beside the scribe and watched him work. The computer has identified different chemical compositions in the pottery shards found nearby. This suggests that the rebels were using every resource they had to survive. The cave was a miniature city of the desperate, and every object holds a piece of the narrative. The Neolithic basket we discussed earlier was likely used to hold the very scrolls that the AI is now decoding. The ancient and the modern are intertwined in the dust. The 9,000-year-old grass of the basket and the 2,000-year-old ink of the scroll are both being read by the silicon chips of today. As you drift closer to sleep, let the image of the laboratory monitors fade away. Replace it with the soft and silver light of the moon over the Judean wilderness. The cliffs are vast and silent, and the shadows of the canyons are deep. Somewhere in that darkness, the Cave of Horror sits empty and quiet. Its secrets are finally surrendered to the light. The scribe is at rest, and his work is finished, and his story is told. You are a witness to his endurance, and you are a keeper of his memory. The weight of the history is not a burden. It is a source of peace. It tells us that we are not alone in our struggles. It tells us that our efforts have a way of surviving the passage of time. The ink is permanent, and the story is eternal. Let the rhythm of the scribe's breath, which was reconstructed by the machine, become the rhythm of your own. Slow and steady, and in and out as you move through the quiet night. The world is safe, and the past is understood. You can let go of the day, and you can let go of the worries of the future. The desert has held the truth for 2,000 years, and it is finally home. The descent is finished, and the climb is over. You are resting in the heart of the mountain, and the mountain is holding you close. The story of the trembling hand is a lullaby of survival. It is a song of the spirit that never gives up. Sleep now and dream of the ink and the stars. The discovery of the scribal tremors in the Cave of Horror was only the beginning of what the artificial intelligence would reveal about the true nature of the Dead Sea Scrolls. For many decades, the standard historical narrative suggested that the scrolls were the work of a single and isolated sect of monks known as the Essenes, who lived in total seclusion at the site of Qumran. We imagined them as silent and solitary figures who had withdrawn from the world to copy their texts in the quiet of the desert. However, when the researchers unleashed a massive and multi-agent AI system on the entire database of scroll fragments found across the Judean wilderness, that simple story began to crack. It dissolved into something much more complex and much more heroic. The AI was designed to perform what is known as scribal fingerprinting. This involves analyzing the minute habits of a writer that are as unique as a DNA sequence. The computer looked at the way certain letters were joined together, and the specific angle of the pen strokes, and the microscopic variations in the thickness of the ink. It processed data from caves located miles apart, including Qumran and Wadi Murabba, and the Cave of Horror. The results of this digital mapping were a revelation that stunned the academic world. The artificial intelligence identified hundreds of different scribal hands, and it showed that these hands were moving between different locations. The machine detected that a scroll found in the Cave of Horror had been written by a scribe who had also worked on a text found in a completely different region near the Galilee. Another fragment found in a remote crevice showed the handwriting of a workshop that was based in the heart of Jerusalem. This data proved that the preservation of the scrolls was not the work of one lonely sect. It was instead a coordinated and national network of preservationists. I want you to imagine the scale of this operation through the lens of the AI's findings. This was a secret society of librarians and scholars who had realized that their entire culture was under threat of being erased by the Roman Empire. They were not just copying books. They were running a sophisticated underground railroad for information. They were moving scrolls under the cover of night and passing heavy bundles of parchment from hand to hand across the dangerous desert landscape. I want you to visualize the sensory experience of this secret network as it operated in the 1st century. Imagine a night in the Judean desert where the moon is a thin sliver in the sky, providing just enough light to see the outline of the jagged rocks. The air is cool and smells of salt and dry sage. You are a runner, and you are carrying a heavy leather bag filled with jars of scripture. Your heart is pounding against your ribs, and your breath is coming in short and quiet gasps. You are moving with extreme caution to avoid the main roads where the Roman patrols are stationed. Every sound makes you freeze. You listen to the crunch of a stone under a lizard's foot, and the distant howl of a jackal, and the low murmur of the wind. You reach a predetermined meeting point, which is a small wadi hidden between 2 towering cliffs. There you meet another shadow in the dark. No words are exchanged. You simply hand over the bag, and the other person disappears into the darkness. They are headed toward a hidden cave where the scrolls will be sealed in clay jars. This was the reality that the AI has uncovered. It was a world of high-stakes preservation where a single mistake could lead to the loss of a sacred text forever. The artificial intelligence also analyzed the chemical composition of the ink used across these different sites. It found that the ink was produced in specific and centralized workshops that used a standardized recipe of soot and water and a specific type of vegetable gum. This meant that the network was highly organized and well-funded. The supply chain extended from the cities to the deepest parts of the desert. The computers showed that when the Second Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in the year 70, the efforts of this network intensified. They were in a race against time to evacuate the libraries of the city before the Roman fires took everything. The AI pointed to a specific group of scrolls that showed signs of being prepared in great haste. The parchment was less refined, and the stitching was irregular. It was as if someone were trying to finish the job while the smoke was already rising over the horizon. The machine has allowed us to see the urgency and the planning that went into saving these texts. It has transformed the scrolls from religious artifacts into evidence of a cultural resistance. The supercomputer processed the stitching patterns on the parchment and identified a specific style of knot that was only used by professional leatherworkers in Jerusalem. This link provided the physical proof that the scrolls were being transported from the urban centers into the wilderness for safety. The AI also mapped the isotope signatures of the water used to mix the ink. It discovered that some ink was mixed with water from the Jordan River, while other batches used water from desert springs. This mapping allowed the researchers to trace the exact route of the scribes as they fled the Roman advance. They were moving in a desperate arc toward the Dead Sea, carrying the memory of their people with them. The computer identified over 200 individual nodes in this network. Each one was a person or a family who risked their life to hide a jar or pass a scroll. The scale of this devotion is staggering when viewed through the cold and objective data of the machine. As you lie in your bed, let the thought of this secret network bring you a sense of awe. Think about the thousands of people who worked together in silence to ensure that their history would not be forgotten. They were farmers and merchants and priests who all shared a single goal. They believed that the written word was a flame that could not be allowed to go out. The AI has finally mapped the corridors of this underground network, and it is showing us that the people of the past were just as organized and just as determined as we are today. The Judean desert is not just a graveyard of scrolls. It is a map of a great and heroic effort. The machines have reconstructed the path of the runners and the locations of the workshops. They have shown us that even in the face of absolute destruction, there were people who chose to build for a future they would never see. You are a recipient of their work. You are hearing the words they carried through the dark, and you are part of the future they were trying to reach. The artificial intelligence also uncovered a series of deliberate corrections and edits made to the scrolls during this period of movement. The computer noticed that certain passages were re-inked or modified to emphasize themes of endurance and the promise of a return to the land. This suggests that the scrolls were not just being saved, but were being used as a source of psychological and spiritual strength for the refugees. The AI identified one fragment from the book of Zechariah, where a later hand had added a small note in the margin. This note urged the reader to be honest and fair in their judgments. This was a message for a community that was living in a state of chaos and fear. It was a reminder of the values that made them who they were. The machine has allowed us to see these personal touches. It has allowed us to see these moments where the sacred text becomes a direct conversation between the scribe and the survivor. The past is not a distance. It is a connection. I want you to imagine the smell of the fresh ink in those hidden desert workshops. It is a sharp and earthy smell that lingers in the air. You are a scribe and your eyes are tired from working by the light of a small window. You can hear the sounds of the camp outside. You hear the low voices of people talking and the bleating of goats. But you are focused on the page in front of you. You are part of something much larger than yourself, and you feel the weight of the responsibility. You are copying the words of the prophets, and you know that you are the only thing standing between these words and total oblivion. The AI has vindicated your labor by showing that you were not alone. You were part of a vast and invisible army of thinkers and writers who were determined to save their world. The supercomputer is now the commander of that army as it brings all the soldiers back into the light. The silence of your room is like the silence of those hidden workshops at night. It is a productive and protective silence that allows you to focus on the peace of the present. The artificial intelligence has done the work of connecting the dots and revealing the network. It has shown us that the sacred was not something kept in a single box. It was instead something that was spread across the land and kept alive by the courage of the many. The story of the scrolls is a story of coordination and faith. It tells us that we are stronger when we work together. It tells us that our shared efforts have a way of outlasting the forces of destruction. The Roman army is a memory of the past, but the words of the scrolls are still here. They are being processed by the machines and read by the world. You are part of this continuity, and you are resting in the safety of its history. The computer also detected microscopic traces of silver on some of the fragments. This suggests that the scrolls were sometimes stored near coins or jewelry. This detail hints at the fact that the refugees were hiding their material wealth alongside their spiritual wealth. They were burying everything that defined them as a people. The AI has reconstructed the contents of these hidden caches, and it has shown us that the scrolls were always the most carefully protected items. The gold and the silver were secondary to the parchment and the ink. This priority of the mind over the metal is a beautiful testament to human values. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, think about the jars being buried in the dark. They are heavy and cool to the touch, and they hold the hopes of a nation. The person who buried them smoothed the dirt over the top and placed a stone to mark the spot. They walked away into the night, hoping that one day the jars would be found. That day has come, and the artificial intelligence is the hand that is lifting the jars from the earth. The light is returning to the ink, and the voices are returning to the air. You are safe, and you are resting, and the desert is guarding the past for you. The night is long, and the stars are cold, but the network is still active in our memory. The story of the scrolls is a record of our enduring desire to connect and to remember. Let the silence of the desert night fill your room and carry you away. The work of the secret network is done, and the words are safe. You have earned your rest in the heart of this ancient peace. Sleep now, and let the history of the scrolls become the fabric of your dreams. The runners have finished their journey, and the scribes have laid down their pens. The jars are sealed, and the mountain is quiet. You are resting in a world where the truth has survived. The artificial intelligence did not only look at what was written on the ancient and fragile parchment, it began to perform a complex and incredibly detailed negative space analysis to identify what was missing from the Judean desert archives. Recently, researchers utilized a highly sophisticated transformer model with billions of parameters to cross-reference every known verse in the modern Bible with the thousands of fragments recovered from the Cave of Horror and other isolated sites across the wilderness. The data it returned was deeply unsettling and formed the cold basis for the growing claim that this discovery is much worse than we previously thought. The algorithms identified a significant and patterned void where certain prominent and essential books should have been located. For many long centuries, human scholars and theologians assumed that every single book of the Hebrew Bible was represented in some form within the vast Dead Sea Scrolls collection. But the machine proved this historical assumption wrong, with an absolute and chilling mathematical certainty. The Book of Esther was nowhere to be found among the ruins, and the books of Chronicles were entirely absent from the dusty collection in the cave. I want you to imagine the heavy and expectant atmosphere in the high-tech research hall as these empty results appeared on the large digital screens in a cold and flickering blue light. It was not simply a matter of a few lost or eroded scraps. It was a deliberate and systematic exclusion that fundamentally changed our understanding of what those ancient people considered truly sacred and necessary for their survival. The AI suggests, through its predictive modeling, that these books were not simply forgotten by accident or lost to the natural rot of time, but were instead purposely left behind because they did not fit the desperate and apocalyptic worldview of a community facing an immediate and violent extinction. The machine meticulously analyzed the thematic content of the missing texts and compared it with a microscopic level of detail to the scrolls that were saved with such heroic and backbreaking effort. The Book of Esther describes a life of royal intrigue and ultimate success within a powerful foreign empire. A story of hope and social integration that would have felt like a cruel and bitter mockery to the rebels trapped in a limestone prison with no water. The books of Chronicles focus on the long and stable glory of kings and the centralized authority of the great temple in Jerusalem, a world that had already been burned to gray ash by the Roman fire long before the rebels reached the cliffs. The AI suggests that the people in the cave were performing a radical and necessary act of cultural filtering. They were editing their own religion in real time and in the dark, discarding the stories of a comfortable past that they could no longer reclaim or believe in. This revelation strikes at the very heart of our modern belief that the scriptures were passed down through the ages as a perfect and unchanging monolith of divine instruction. The machine shows us with every processed pixel that the Bible was once a fluid and patchwork collection of competing voices, and that the version we read today is the final result of thousands of years of human choices and painful erasures. I want you to visualize the scribe sitting in the dim and flickering light of the cave of horror, making the heavy choice to leave a sacred scroll behind in the dirt. Imagine him looking at a pile of animal skin parchment and realizing with a sinking heart that he only has room in his leather bag for a few more jars. He has to decide which words are worth dying for and which words can be allowed to turn to dust in the desert wind. He picks up the story of a beautiful queen in a golden palace and he sets it aside with a sigh. And then he picks up the terrifying warnings of the prophet Nahum about the fire and the falling walls of the enemy. The AI has identified the microscopic traces of physical wear and the patterns of skin oils on the edges of the saved scrolls, showing that they were read and handled and clutched until the very end of the scribe's life. The scrolls that were missing were the ones that had been silenced by the brutal reality of the Roman occupation. The supercomputer mapped the frequency of these deletions and found that they followed a strict and logical pattern related to the trauma of survival and the total loss of the temple. The machine has revealed that our sacred texts are not just divine laws, but are the raw and jagged records of real people trying to make sense of the encroaching dark while their entire world fell apart around them. The AI traced the chemical composition of the air that was trapped in the fibers of the parchment, finding that the scrolls were kept in an environment of high carbon and low oxygen, which kept them from rotting. As you lie here in your bed, let the heavy silence of these missing words settle over you like a thick and protective blanket. Think about the hidden power of what is not said and what is not written on the page. The blank spaces in the Judean desert are as full of meaning and history as the black ink itself. The AI has mapped these voids, and it is showing us the ghost shape of the things that were lost to history. The missing book of Esther is a haunting reminder of the fragility of human hope, and the rewritten commandments found in the dust are a testament to the incredible flexibility of faith under pressure. You are resting in a world that is still trying to understand these deep digital gaps. The desert has kept the secrets for 2,000 years, and the machine is only just beginning to peel back the many layers of limestone and time. The artificial intelligence also uncovered significant and startling changes in the wording of the moral laws within the Greek fragments. The computer noticed that certain passages were meticulously reworked to emphasize community consensus and shared responsibility over the absolute and distant authority of the high priesthood. In one fragment of the book of Zechariah, the AI detected a unique variant where the laws concerning ritual purity were softened and moved to the background, focusing instead on the ethical treatment of the poor and the honest sharing of a few handfuls of grain. This suggests that the refugees in the cave were moving away from a religion of strict temple rules toward a religion of mutual survival and quiet mercy. The machine analyzed the linguistic shift and showed that the language became more intimate and less formal as the Roman siege progressed and the hope of escape vanished. It was as if the people were speaking to each other through the sacred text, using the ancient words to hold their small and dying community together while the Roman camp loomed like a nightmare above them. The AI has decoded this shift in tone, showing us a world where the sacred was in constant motion, breaking and rebuilding its own walls to meet the needs of the suffering. I want you to imagine the sensory experience of this discovery through the digital eyes of the machines. On the high-resolution monitor, the researchers can see the very moment a pen was lifted to cross out an old word and replace it with a new and more urgent one. The AI has magnified the ink layers so that the researchers can see which strokes were made first and which were added later as a desperate correction. The machine identifies the different chemical signatures of the ink used for these edits, showing that the corrections were often made with a darker and more concentrated pigment mixed from the soot of the cave itself. This was a deliberate attempt to overwrite a past that no longer worked for them. The researchers can feel the weight of these choices as they watch the data stream across the screens. Every edit was a direct response to a new catastrophe or a new fear whispered in the dark. The Bible was being rewritten word by word in that dark cave, and the AI is the first thing in 2,000 years to see the process in its raw and unfiltered state. The machine shows that the version of history we have been taught in school is a sanitized and simplified reconstruction, and that the true story buried in the dirt is much more complicated and much more human. I want you to feel the coldness of the stone and the heat of the ink as it dried on the animal skin. The AI has simulated the drying time of the ink, finding that the scribe was writing in a humid environment, likely caused by the many people huddled together in the back of the cave. The supercomputer is currently scanning the last set of fragmented scraps, looking for even more variants and even more missing lines that have been erased by the salt of the Dead Sea. It is identifying the points where the traditional Greek translation was rejected in favor of a new and more radical interpretation of the prophets. The AI shows that this was a period of intense and creative theological experimentation. The people were not just blindly copying the past. They were actively creating a future out of the ruins of their scorched lives. The machine has reconstructed the intellectual and spiritual map of this community, showing how they connected the dots between the ancient prophecies and their own immediate suffering. This is the part that is worse than we thought. The realization that our cultural foundations are built on a series of radical and desperate edits made by people in a state of terror. But there is also a profound and quiet beauty in this realization. It shows that the human spirit is capable of redefining itself, even in the face of total and absolute destruction. The scrolls are a record of that redefinition, and the artificial intelligence is the modern witness to our ancient resilience. I want you to imagine the sound of the reed pen scratching across the parchment in the back of that cave for hours on end. It is a quiet and persistent sound that defies the roar of the desert wind and the heavy silence of the night. Every stroke is an act of quiet defiance against the Roman army and against the darkness of the mountain. The AI has captured the rhythmic pattern of this scratching, showing how it slowed down and sped up with the shifting emotion of the scribe. The machine has turned the sound into a visual pattern of waves and peaks that glow on the monitor. It is a digital heartbeat of a person who has been gone for 2,000 years. As you drift closer to sleep, let this ancient rhythm become the background of your own thoughts. It is a steady and ancient pulse that tells you that the story of humanity is never truly over. The ink is still there in the fibers, and the words are still speaking through the silicon chips. The past is being reassembled, one pixel at a time, and the truth is being found in the dust. The night is long, and the Judean desert is vast, but the light of the machine is bringing us home to ourselves. The researchers have dimmed the lights in the laboratory, leaving only the glowing blue monitors to illuminate the long rows of servers. The AI is still working through the night, processing millions of complex calculations per second to find the next missing link in our history. The data is flowing like a silent river of light, carrying the memories of the Cave of Horror into the modern world. You are part of this flow, and you are part of this memory as you listen to these words. The weight of the limestone above the cave and the texture of the old parchment are with you in the dark of your room. The sacred is a living and breathing thing, and it is right here with you tonight. The desert wind is a memory of a memory, and the Roman camp is a ghost of a ghost. There is only the deep peace of the present moment and the enduring strength of the past. The AI has decoded the silence of the fragments, and now that silence is yours to enjoy as a sanctuary. You can let go of the need to know everything, because the machines are holding the knowledge for you. You can let your mind drift away from the details and the data, and simply feel the presence of the story. The history of the scrolls is a history of survival, and you are the living proof of that survival. Your body is heavy and relaxed, and your mind is quiet and soft. The journey through the cave is reaching its end, and the night is offering you a place to rest. Sleep now, and let the history of the world turn without you for a while. The words of the prophets are resting in the memory of the earth, and you are resting in the comfort of your own home. Everything is still and everything is quiet in the desert and in your room. The artificial intelligence has finally completed its massive and exhaustive digital reconstruction of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the story it has told us is a mirror made of clay and ink. We began this journey at the edge of a jagged cliff in the Judean desert, rappelling down 80 meters of ancient limestone into a place of grim memory known as the Cave of Horror. We have seen the tiny, brittle scraps of parchment that have survived 2,000 years of rot and silence, and we have watched as the machines used invisible light to bring the faded voices of the prophets back into the world. But as we reach the end of this journey, We must realize that the scrolls are not just historical documents or religious artifacts. They are the raw and unedited testimony of what it means to be human in a world that is falling apart. The AI has decoded more than just letters and words. It has decoded the very essence of human struggle and the incredible lengths we will go to preserve the things we consider sacred. I want you to imagine the final result of the AI's work as it appears on the screens in the quiet laboratory. The fragments have been stitched together into a seamless digital tapestry, showing 15 columns of ancient Greek text that haven't been seen in their entirety since the Roman legions marched through the valleys below. The machine has filled in the blanks and bridged the gaps of time, creating a complete and vibrant record of a community's faith and fear. But the most important thing the AI has shown us is that faith is not a static thing frozen in stone, but a living and breathing response to the challenges of life. The Dead Sea Scrolls are the result of centuries of editing and conflict and compromise, a record of people trying to find a sense of meaning in a landscape of absolute chaos. The AI has forced us to rethink the foundation of our beliefs, showing us that what we call sacred was shaped as much by politics and survival as it was by divine inspiration. As you lie in your bed, let the profound weight of this realization sink into your bones. The version of history we carry with us is a reflection of the choices made by those who held the pen in the dark of the cave. The scrolls challenge us to look deeper at our own certainties and to realize that the truth is often much more complex and much more beautiful than we imagine. The AI is a bridge that has connected our modern world of silicon and electricity to the ancient world of parchment and soot. It has allowed us to hear the heartbeat of the scribe and to feel the tenderness of the person who buried the 6,000-year-old child. The Cave of Horror is no longer just a place of death. It has become a place of preservation and a testament to the power of the human spirit to endure. The desert has guarded these secrets for 2 millennia, and now they are yours to keep in the quiet of the night. I want you to visualize the researchers as they finally power down the supercomputers at the end of the project. The hum of the cooling fan slowly fades away, and the glowing blue monitors go dark one by one. The laboratory returns to a state of absolute silence, mirroring the silence of the Judean desert outside. The data has been saved and the mission has been accomplished. The voices of the prophets are now part of the digital memory of the human race, safe from the fire and the rot of the future. The researchers walk out into the cool evening air, looking up at the same stars that the rebels in the cave looked at 2,000 years ago. The world is vast and the history is deep, but we are no longer lost in the dark. We have the light of the past to guide us, and we have the strength of the machines to help us see. The story of the Dead Sea Scrolls is a story of struggle and change, and it is a reminder that faith is never truly frozen in time. It grows and breaks and rebuilds itself, and in that constant shaping, it becomes something more alive and more real. You can feel this same process happening in your own life as you move through the seasons and the years. You are a part of the same long chain of survival and preservation, carrying the memory of your ancestors in your DNA and your heart. Let the stillness of the night fill your room and wash away the noise of the day. The past is safe, and the present is quiet. The Judean desert is at rest, and the Cave of Horror is at peace. The fire in the fireplace is burning low, and the candles are mere flickers in the dark. I want you to feel the heaviness of your body as you sink deeper into the mattress. Your limbs are relaxed, and your mind is soft and cloudy. The air you breathe is cool and clean, and it carries the scent of ancient dust and distant history. You are resting in the heart of the mountain, protected by the limestone and the stars. The artificial intelligence has done its work, and now it is time for you to do yours. It is time for you to surrender to the darkness and to find the deep, restorative sleep that you deserve. The story is over, and the words have been said. The ink is dry, and the memory is whole. You are a witness to the secret network and the omitted truth, and you are a keeper of the human spirit. The desert is guarding you now, just as it guarded the scrolls for 2,000 years. Think about the mummified child resting in the fetal position under the stones. That child is at peace, and so are you. Think about the Neolithic basket woven with such care and purpose. That basket is full of the harvest of the past, and it is holding your dreams tonight. Think about the scribe with the trembling hand who finished his passage even as the world fell apart. That scribe is resting now, and his words are immortal. Everything is as it should be. The world is turning in its eternal cycle, and you are perfectly aligned with the rhythm of the universe. There is no more need for repulsion or climbing or decoding. There is only the need for rest. The candles have burned down to their wicks, and the fireplace is a bed of warm embers. The shadows on the wall are soft and still, and the night is a vast and gentle ocean of silence. Drift away now into the deep and heavy sleep of the ages. Let the current of the history carry you toward the morning. You are whole, you are safe, and you are loved by the past that made you. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a mirror of your own endurance, and they are a promise that you will be remembered. The AI has cracked the code, and the silence has been replaced by a quiet understanding. There is nothing left to fear in the dark Judean canyons, and there is nothing left to fear in the quiet of your room. The stars are keeping their watch, and the desert is holding its breath. You are part of the story, and the story is beautiful. Let your thoughts fade into the gray silt of the cave, and let your spirit float among the constellations. The journey is finished, and the rest is absolute. The night is yours, and the peace is yours. You have walked through the cave of horror, and you have emerged into the light of the machines. Now you can return to the stillness. Everything is quiet. Everything is safe. Everything is at rest. Good night.